We talked about how before you can intelligently discuss ethical topics, you have to be able to intelligently discuss. In other words, reason correctly, right? So there are certain rules about syllogism that we will learn about. And so logic is defined as the science of correct thinking. There is a science to it. And the broader sense of science than the empirical scientific method uses the term. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. Ethics is defined as the science of correct human behavior. So, but before we can get to ethics, we have to talk about some other branches of philosophy. Those are both considered disciplines of philosophy. And if you go to a good philosophy program in college, you would take sequentially logic first, and then you would take philosophy of knowledge, and then you would take philosophy of being, or metaphysics it's called. Philosophy of knowledge I'll be referring to as gnoseology, sometimes it's called epistemology. And so after metaphysics, you'll have philosophical anthropology, or philosophy of the human being. Okay, and then you'll have ethics, and you'll throw in there philosophy of nature, philosophy of science, etc. But ethics usually is one of the last things you cover. So, in other words, I'm going to rush through introducing a bunch of philosophical concepts before getting to ethics proper. Okay. Before we can know what correct human behavior is, we have to know what the human being is. Before we can know what the human being is, we have to know what a being is. Before we can know what a being is, we have to know whether or not it's possible to know at all. And before we can know whether or not it's possible to know, we have to think correctly. So, we start with logic, and then we move on to philosophy of knowledge, gnoseology, and we'll learn the theories of knowledge. And theories of knowledge are very important for understanding the theories of morality, because theories of morality are based on the theories of knowledge. So if you don't know the theories of knowledge, you won't understand the theories of morality. Okay, so this isn't a theology class, so the first couple are a little irrelevant, except to say that ethics is not necessarily Christian or non-Christian. Okay? Just a branch of philosophy. It's not religious or non-religious. Okay, it's a philosophical discipline. Well, obviously this is a Catholic school, so I might give Catholic examples here and there to illustrate things. And let's see. So, reasons to study logic would be to improve one's thinking. So, let me blow this up a little bit. Oops. So, if you learn logic, that helps you reason more correctly. In other words, it helps you to avoid the common logical fallacies that we discussed last time. Okay? So that we all tend to fall into those fallacies. Ignore what's bold for today. That's for tomorrow. I didn't go over it in the other classes. The meaning of science. But, so we have logic as the art and science of correct thinking. We talked about that. Now, while I was given all those examples of if God exists, then he's a squirrel, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that was to show that logic only has to do, strictly speaking, with the agreement between ideas, the coherence of ideas. Whether those things exist or not in reality is irrelevant. Okay, so if you study like symbolic logic, it'll be all this A, B, blah, 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 and there's a lot of other letters that I'll introduce later, and it's kind of like math. Okay, so it has very little to do with what actually exists in the world. So that's the formal, what's called the formal aspect of reasoning, or formal logic. Material logic will come later, and that's otherwise known as philosophy of knowledge. And that is after you follow the process correctly. So there's, you follow the process correctly or incorrectly. We're learned denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent are common fallacies. Those have to do with the process themselves. Some of those fallacies we'll talk about later have more to do with gnoseology, or the theory of knowledge. And so those would have to do with the agreement of the mind with the reality. So it's one thing to follow the process correctly. It's another thing to ask, is this premise true or not? Okay, does it agree with reality, or does it just not make any sense? So moving on from that point, without giving examples, I gave examples last time. We'll give examples next time. There's a fundamental thing to learn in logic and the philosophy of knowledge from a different perspective is the 3 acts of the mind. Okay, so we're going to introduce a good deal of terminology here. Some of these terms are more important than others. We'll use some of these terms later on when we're talking about ethical topics. But first, the 3 acts of the mind. Okay, so we have this. A is B, B is C, therefore A is C. That's a syllogism, okay? And these are all premises. They're also all judgments. Okay, now, A is C is the inference that comes forth from joining these 2 judgments together. So this whole thing is a syllogism, but the conclusion itself that we draw from these premises is called an inference. That's the 3rd act of the mind. So that's the goal, okay? Reasoning, argument. That's the goal of the acts of the mind. That's the final act of the mind. Moving backwards, you can't get to an inference without judgments. Okay? The judgment is linking together 2 or more concepts. Okay, so inference is linking together 2 or more judgments, and judgment is linking together 2 or more concepts. Okay, so here the concepts are represented by letters. Okay, so A is a concept, B is a concept, C is a concept. Okay, whenever I say A is B, that's a judgment. All right. So a judgment is anytime I say something of another. Another word for that is anytime I predicate something of another. It's another term there, predication. So if you remember your grammar, you have the subject position, A, right? And B would be in the predicate position here. Here, B is in the subject position and C is in the predicate position. All right, so we're predicating B of A. We're predicating C of B. Okay, just terminology. Now, we link the 2 concepts together by means of what's called a copula. Is or is not. Okay, so we're linking the 2 concepts together by the copula, and we link the 2 judgments together by the middle term, which we talked about last time. Okay, so what exactly, though, is a concept? So conceptualization is the 1st act of the mind because it's the process by which we arrive at concepts. Okay, so when I'm a little baby, or any little baby, think of my daughter, okay, she's just now starting to name things. So she knows mama and dada, but little babies at her age, not even 1 yet, usually when they see somebody else, they'll call them mama and dada too. So see another woman, she'll call her mama. Most likely, for some reason, they tell the difference between sexes before they tell the difference between other things. But then they see another guy, and they'll call that guy dada. Okay, so she don't really get the concept yet of what mama and dada is. But at some point, something will click, and she'll say, "Hey, that's not my mama. That's a different thing, whatever it is. You know, it's a different woman. This is my mama. Okay, or that's not my dada. This is my dada. Okay, so another example. When I was a kid, I used to have to name cars, and I had a concept of a car at this point. I had to walk around and touch the car and say car, car, car. My parents would pull me away because I had to go somewhere and go, no! I wanted to touch the car and say car. Okay, car. So why was I doing that? I didn't go up to a desk and say car. I didn't go up to a podium and say car. I knew what a car was. I knew what it looked like, more or less, right? So we form these concepts. So a concept is what we call a universal or a category in which many particular things participate. So this is a desk, and this is a desk, and this is a desk. They're all slightly different. They're particular desks, right? They're slightly different from each other, but they all belong to the category desk. Okay, and this is a podium, and this particular thing here belongs to the category podium. However I want to define podium, right? And every possible podium in the world belongs to the category, the idea that I have of podium. I'm imagining another podium over there, and it belongs to the concept podium, even though it doesn't exist. Okay. So, in other words, the concept is a universal. It's a broad category in which many particular things participate. Okay, it's not just an image in the brain. So we have conceptualization as the process by which we arrive at those concepts, and there are different theories about how we do that. But we won't talk about. And then judgment, linking together concepts. So when I say this marker is black, I have to know first the concepts, marker. This thing right here falls in the category marker. And then when I see black, oh, that thing right there falls in the category of the color black. So those are two concepts, black and marker, and I link them together. And I say this marker is black. And that's a judgment. Okay? I predicate black of the marker by means of a copula. So, then, on top of that, we have Aristotle. He's a really smart guy. He was like the founder of logic as a science. And he was also a biologist, a physician. He started out that way, and he started writing philosophy. That's what he's most known for. So he came up, he said, okay, so how many different kinds of predicates are there? I can predicate black of this marker. What else can I predicate about it? What else can I say about the marker? I can say it's small. I can say it has this shape. Blah, 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 right? Now, what are the different types of predicates that exist? All the different types of predicates that exist. How can I categorize the predicates? Well, he comes up with 10 categories of predicates. 10 different types of things you can say about other things. All right? So, it's not so important that you understand all the predicates, what they mean exactly, but it's important that you know the difference between substance and accidents. Okay? The first category is substance. Substance is not exactly the same as what it means in biology or chemistry, excuse me. But it's broadly speaking, it just means what exists in itself. Okay, so to give a different example, this shirt. This is a shirt. Okay, that's the substantial predication. Now I can predicate other types of predicates of the shirt. I can say, this shirt is blue. Okay, I'm predicating a quality. Colors are qualities of things. So I'm predicating blue of the shirt. So blue is a type of accident. An accident doesn't mean what we typically mean by accident, like you run into something, whatever. It just means, in philosophy, it comes from the Latin, unfortunate translation, we haven't come up with a better word for it lately, is what exists in another. Okay, so substance is what exists in itself, accident is what exists in another. The blue color does not exist by itself, it just exists in the shirt. Right? The shirt exists in itself. Right? It could be a different color. It could change all kinds of accidents. Its size could change, its shape could change, et cetera, and still be a shirt. So these are various kinds of accidents, broadly speaking. So we can say the shirt not only is blue, but it's extra large. It was given to me by my wife. It was created 5 years ago in China. Currently is wrapped around my body. That's the position it takes. Okay. Action. The atoms within the shirt are moving around. right? Now, passion doesn't mean what it typically means, when we use the word passion. It comes from the Latin passus, which means to receive something or to be the object of an action. So anytime I act, when I touch this podium, the podium is being touched. That's the passion. It's being touched. Or when I walk on the floor is being walked on. Or kick the desk is being kicked. That's the passion, right? So action and passion are related to each other. Passion is a recipient of action. Okay, possession is an odd translation of a complicated concept we won't get into. So it's more important that you just get the difference between substance and excellence, okay? So I can make a substantial predication, say this marker, this is a marker, or I can say, make a qualitative predication and say this marker is black. Or I can say this marker is small, quantitative predication, etc., etc., all right? Then there are finally ways of predicating. Slightly different from types of predicates. Ways of predicating. There it's important to see that species, most important part is species is the result of genus plus specific difference. What does that mean? Well, again, genus and species don't mean exactly what they mean in biology, but they have more generic meanings. So genus means the broadest category. It's the broadest category of thing, except for transcendental, which we'll talk about later, but it's a broad category. And then species is a more restricted category. So we get the species by adding specific differences or other features, attributes to the thing. All right, so an example. Animal. Animal comes from the Latin anima, which means anything that moves around. Okay, so an animal is something that moves around. And we add specific differences. This animal is fuzzy, it has 4 legs, and it barks. Okay, we get the result, species, dog, right? So now, various specific differences there, whatever they are, it doesn't matter. However you want to define something, the way you define something, you start with a genus, a broader category, you add other qualities, and you figure out what the species is from there. Okay, so, and then going back up to these accidents, they can be predicated in more or less essential ways. So for example, it's less essential to a dog that it be brown than that it bark. Okay? So the fact that the dog barks, you could say that's a property, because that's an essential thing for a dog. Okay? I don't know if any dog doesn't bark, it's because of some like throat disorder or something, right? So the dogs ordinarily bark, so barking is more essential to dogs than being brown, because you can have any number of colored dogs, right? Maybe more essential than being brown, the dog has to have 4 legs. Well, it could have 3 legs, right? But most of the time it has 4 legs. Okay, so the less essential ones are called accidents, so they're more strictly speaking, so like incidental accidents, you might say. Whereas the more essential accidents, okay, like being able to bark, would be called properties. Okay, that's all that is. So that's a little terminology there too. So properties are more essential accidents, and accident, strictly speaking, would be something that exists in the thing, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect the essence of the thing. All right. Any questions?